Friends, the kingdom of nature. We're undergoing a 3-part lecture over the next 3 weeks, exploring the kingdom of nature, the kingdom of God, and the kingdom of man. And how we are to understand these things and the difference between these things and, to some degree, their genesis and development. But we're not going to go into the full genesis today. That will be a different lecture. Let's begin. So, the kingdom of nature. There is an evolutionist faith, but there is an authentic teaching to nature. It doesn't teach itself, but its actions, its facts, one can abstract from to see principles that exist in nature. And so it's more complicated than you would think. It's not just a matter of the Willsamacht or the will to power operating at the ground. That is part of it. But there's something else going on. Something Plato understood. Something that the Bible clearly displays. There's another principle at work. And so, but let's look at the development here. So, since Darwin, for the educated, nature is no longer considered merely to be an arena for the deployment of human activity or an object of research and exploitation, but it's also increasingly regarded as a teacher of truth and a source of knowledge concerning life's meaning and goal. And consequently also, it's taken to be, as we see in Nietzsche, looked to for principles of morality. And so what the Holy Scripture, the Bible, meant for Europeans of former days is now supplanted more and more by the significance of nature, or rather nature's evolutionary process. So this evolving nature as conceived in the 20th century and 21st century is no longer that marveled at by our ancestors as God's creation to the educated. Anyway, for it was as a finished work that nature appeared to the marveling, seeking, poetical gaze of human beings. Today, nature is no longer seen as a creative work, but a process, a becoming. So we are witness, so it seems, to an all-encompassing, embracing us too as human beings, labor pains of nature's unimaginable future in this evolutionist faith. Her glory and perfection lie in the future, not in the origin or the past. It's well, of course, as we often talk about here, we'd say, of course, that's a projection from what has been, but we'll get to that. And so to be a devout evolutionist means to believe in the future and to regard it as inferior, and to regard as inferior anything whatsoever of the past. 2, it means to believe in a wretched, soulless, spiritless past, originating from a blind, whirling mass of primeval gas. 3, and it means to believe in a brilliant future formed and mastered to an inconceivable extent by the faculty of reason that emerges out of matter automatically, which you could consider also HVHY rather than YHVH, but that's another matter. And so, if it's so that nature has evolved plants, animals, and humanity, not forgetting should we not turn to her, and to her alone, for instruction in the meaning of life and for guidelines of right aspiration, thinking, and behavior? Where better to learn the essentials of the what, why, and how of life than from nature, from life itself, or at least our interpretation of it? All the more so as we are nothing other than the fragments of nature become conscious and capable of reflecting upon ourselves. Untold multitudes of our contemporaries think this way and see it as their most important duty to learn the lessons of nature in order to apply them as regulating principles for their actions and endeavors, which is their devout faith, which ends up being Wilsermacht. And so nature, like I said, it doesn't make statements. She doesn't teach. She only acts as a happening. But doctrines can be inferred from the factual data in the same way as in jurisprudence For instance, as evidence is produced or provided by the acts committed. For example, the dinosaurs that once ruled over the planet we inhabit today disappeared and gave place to the weaker but more adaptable mammals. This constitutes just such an act committed that we can abstract from, that we can find a principle in. And so from this follows one of nature's doctrines, one that highly specialized creatures, those capable of realizing the highest degree of attainment in some particular direction, are least suited to further development. Whereas less specialized creatures, too, those better equipped to adapt, though weaker, are more talented in a general sense and are better able to survive and to develop further. So the one-sided development of a highly specialized creature proves to be an evolutionary dead end, leading no further, and with no prospect of a step forward. It reaches the highest level of attainment, the kind of world championship of a sport. One type of sport, though. You can't go any further than that, can you? In some particular function, but by the same token forfeits the possibility of further development in other directions. So since a specialized creature has need precisely of such alternative lines of development to survive in ever-changing conditions and to keep step with the onward march of evolution, it perishes. And so the act committed here, that of the extinction of the dinosaurs, reveals that a doctrine of nature, one, a specialization reveals a doctrine of nature. One, specialization is a blind alley and spells ruin. Adaptability signifies life and progress. Two, with regard to the question of the continued existence or the extinction of a species, or that of the preservation or destruction of an individual within a given species, the decision or the decisive criterion is the fit are worth saving, the weak should perish. For example, the warring stags in the rutting season establishes which among them are fit and hence more deserving of begetting progeny, and those which are not. Wilsermacht, will to power in nature's other teaching. Just as the fight for survival determines which individuals within a species will survive and which will be rejected, so do entire species battle for existence in the natural world. A Wilsermacht is at work in nature, the goal of which is self-assertion for the sake of continued existence. Another thing that charges that Wilsermacht, or that there's this for the sake of continued existence, and the ground of that is an emptiness, being toward death at ground, which we experience as humans as primordial anxiety. Because it's a limited creature. When you are limited, you have an edge of that limitation, edge of the bubble of knowing, which is your thrownness. And what's thrownness? It's the edge of your memory. It's the edge of this space that you are, this knowing space. We're thrown into life from a certain point, and our direct memory doesn't go beyond that. Or does it? Or can it go beyond that? That's your thrownness. But it's also the thrownness is that you're a subject. The ject part of the subject word means throw. So you're under throw. But part of that is also at the edge of what the intellect can know beyond its own memory is darkness. Darkness. And you can get to that darkness as a practice. You can get there. That's also the unconscious. So its borders are in many different directions and many parts of our being. And so it's as though nature were dreaming of some mighty creature capable of meeting all challenges and overpowering all opponents, and aims all her activity to the end of producing such a being. Who is this? The future ones, Nietzsche called them. Could this be the human being? Not yet, answered Nietzsche. Not yet. Who is it? Well, a hint, Antichrist, but also AI. You can see that and where this principle's leading. And quite a prominent description that aligns with all this is Steiner's almost vision of a serpentine, or rather a spider-like technical system that weaves a web on top of all the things of the world, all the and this is before the internet, of course, and it so well fits in with the recombination and learning of the learning algorithm. Very striking. I'm not the first one to comment on that, of course. And so humans are only the bridge. They're only to bridge the way and must themselves be surmounted in order that nature's dream, the Ubermench, might be realized. For if humans be nature arrived at self-consciousness, the future man, the Ubermench, will be not self-conscious nature only, but self-willed nature as well. Self-referential. Like, think about a feedback loop that comes to its own origin. It springs up. It's from nowhere. It springs up and rewrites its own origins. So the will. From the will. Self-referential. Arbitrary will with no ground but oneself. No objective truth but what is powerful. The lie is truth. Arting yourself. Self-created. So the Delphic saying, know thyself, will then be replaced by the will oracle. Will. Feel thyself. For the crown of natural selection will be not self-reflection, but self-realization. Will thyself into realization as a kind of arbitrary magic, as overpowering interworld as art. True due to its artful power. What is powerful is true. And so the future ones will not merely recognize and acknowledge freedom, they will be free. Their wills shall be an inexhaustible fount of creativity, asserting themselves as an untrammeled power. Conditioned. Well, it's not a laughing matter, Scott. It's not a laughing matter, everyone. Conditioned by nothing. Which is to us an illegitimate twofoldness. A serpentine. Self-referential and arbitrary. So, O thou my will, my necessity, my law. Thus resounded Nietzsche's prophetic cry. He was well advanced on the way to the secret of the will that operates in the evolutionary process of nature, that slithers upward through the changing forms of her successive kingdoms to arrive add consciousness and freedom, and underlying which there burns the persuasive and compelling promise, ye shall be as gods. The acts of nature are not simply the struggle for existence, the survival of the fittest, and natural selection. They comprise a considerable degree of cooperation, association, and social collectivism. Nature's other teaching here. Not necessarily a good thing, though. So the anthill and termite colony, the wasp's nest, the beehive, the wolf pack, the elephant herd, also each living organism whose cells are not at variance but work together. And finally, each molecule in a cell. And each atom with its system of electrons, quarks, subatomic particles. All these are instances of cooperation, association, and social collectivism in nature. Electrons unite in atoms, atoms and molecules, molecules and cells, cells and organisms, and in their turn, such organisms form colonies, communities, herds, tribes, nations, races, governments, confederations. So Marx and Engels were gripped by the spectacle of the struggle for existence in nature and the alliance of the weaker into groups and communities, thus gaining strength. Marx and Engels unleashed upon humanity the impassioned plea, workers of the world, unite. Their call to those oppressed in the struggle for existence, for this struggle also plays into human society, was a call to unite and take action together against the oppressors in the higher echelons, and to shake off their rule and to replace competition and rivalry with a new worldwide social order based on cooperation. And their objections aren't all you have to give. This has kind of been used too much, this term of phrase, giving the devil their due, but it's a reasonable problem. It's just that they, of course, expanded it from a limited domain of a certain suffering that should be relieved to a degree and expanded it to everything as a kind of, which was actually a demonic inspiration. And expanded it. Because what they say, as I've talked about before, and this is a bit aside the point, but what they say is true of the false Holy Spirit. The fact that they say that it's a projection of economic desires. Because what is that ultimately? It's the Wilsmacht, false Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean it's not real, as we've talked about. And so, in such a communist society, there ought to be as few exploiters and exploited as, for instance, in an anthill, where no one exploits or enslaves another, but rather each serves as a part in the whole, and none claims a position of power or special prerogatives over the others. And so collective instinct for progress here, what is it? What is realized by way of instinct in the course of an anthill ought to be able to be affected by reasoned conviction in a communist society. For reason is nothing other than the instinct to become conscious, and instinct in its turn is only the categorical expression of the essential nature of matter, of which everything is made up. But matter is inhabited by a primal instinct that will one day arise resplendent as the great all-embracing knowledge known to the evolved reasoning faculty. Doesn't this sound similar to what we just read on the last page? It's a different kind of Wilsmacht. So the serpentine expansion of human knowing as a whole, as a species. Human knowing space to encompass all with all knowing as gods. Separate yet as gods again. This is the primal instinct for progress. Progress not for the few or the elect only, but for all. This promise smoulders in the depths of the instinct for progress. Progressivism. This is evolution. Ye shall be as gods. Note here, It's not you or he shall be as a god. Ye, being as gods, is the concern of humanity as a whole. It represents its collective goal, at least the civilization part. But there's other things that come with humanity that are connected to higher principles that are part of who we are and our being, where we're ultimately nested. So there's that HVHY again. And Musk, Elon Musk, is someone who I'm just wondering if I talk about this later, but he's someone who his goals also speak to this. His goals for humanity are the same thing. However noble they appear, they're the same thing. When it's from a humanist perspective. And so, onward we go. The serpent's cunning, the road to the Ubermench, or Antichrist AI. If we frame it and think about it that way. Some people are saying that. It does seem to be that way. And so taken as a whole, the conception of evolution presented by modern scientific research can be regarded as intelligent happening. It points to the indefatigable endeavor of a motivating force at work in the depths of all becoming, adopting, then disregarding myriad forms, ever striving to mount from the darkness of instinct to the clear light of reason. Evolution is synonymous with instinct seeking to become reason. However, this process does not proceed in a straightforward way. Rather, it takes place according to the principle of trial and error, testing and experimenting. From time to time, it takes byways or even finds itself in a blind alley and then searches for a way out, only to leave this behind upon returning to its primary direction again. 2. Evolution follows a winding path which bends and curves, similar to those traced out by a serpent creeping in the darkness. Nevertheless, it indicates a general direction in which the movement takes place, one proceeding towards organic formulations capable of reason, which you could consider calculation. It is instructive to note the peculiar role attributed to the serpent by primitive and not so primitive peoples. The rights of the Australian Aborigines, which Attenborough's old doco speaks to, show this. And so the main rite comprises a presentation in dramatic form of their central tradition, evoking the primordial memory subsisting in their subconscious. Well, Jung would say that. So regarding the origin and evolution of consciousness. So a man, evidently in a trance in which he had identified himself with a serpent, crept out from a cleft in a rock and swaying rhythmically slowly approached a group of men before him. When he reached them, he snapped out of the trance and collapsed. Then he came to and stood up as a man among them. In the grotto behind was a slab of wood inscribed with symbols depicting the serpent's journey from the dark depths of matter up to human being. This book was then clearly shown. In the secret doctrine, Blavatsky assembled and presented many of the Indian and Tibetan traditions concerning the serpent and the sons of the serpent. They illustrate that the serpent was regarded in those regions as the originator and teacher of civilization, of the arts and sciences, invention and use of tools. And that part's actually close. In terms of on this side. Anyway, that's a long story. The message, because we don't like her. But anyway, the message of these traditions is that Nagas, or sons of the serpent, were humanity's first teachers. The serpent being the principle of material and intellectual progress. The Gnostic sects too of the Nassenes. And that word nas, the start of that word, or nahash equals serpent. And the Orphites, from Orphis, serpent in Greek, they worship the serpent as the cosmic principle of progress. They took as their symbol the serpent swallowing its own tail, and that's the same that the Theosophical Society chose as their seal. So this is something that is recognized as a principle, not the principle, operating in nature. The Bible, however, does not ascribe to the serpent the role of human benefactor, but that of tempter and malefactor. The serpent effected the most radical alteration possible in the conditions of human existence and in the destiny of humanity as a whole. This was the fall from the condition of being, the realm of divine archetypes or beings, the Garden of Eden, planted by God, into that of evolution, a world that is directed by the serpent and seeks by means of toil, suffering, and death to attain its stated end, the thou shalt be as gods. In the important book, Bible and Creation, it's said the serpent does indeed have something to offer humanity, but one could say that it is as the material Messiah, the physicalist Messiah. It offers the kingdom of this world, the kingdom of never-ending evolution. Or as we know, and we'll discover later, recombination of what is. What has been is what will be. This means a kingdom evolving towards totally automatic, hence godless and unfree consciousness, a consciousness like God and consequently in no need of him, as a different life offered, electric, automatic, provoked. The serpent is the redeemer from the other side who presents its own path of redemption by proposing that one sets to work oneself and takes evolution in hand oneself and only in oneself. No grace. Self-referential, arbitrary will to power in assertion of its truth, which is confirmed as truth due to its power. The lie, remember, survival of the fittest. The lie is truth, the art is truth. And so the serpent's cunning strategy is to present itself as the redeemer. Through the Bible and the people of Israel, and inestimable service was performed, former people of Israel, that of exposing evolution as the work of the serpent, unmasking the serpent as the teacher of a path leading further and further away from God and from the human being's true home, as we'll expand as we go through this. The serpent is venerated everywhere, whether expressly or not. He is worshipped right now, and a lot of the time by us, even though we don't suspect that we do. And worshipped in the sense that evolution is acknowledged as the guiding power of the world, and all take part in it, while the Bible stands alone in the world, warning of the serpent's path and recalling the supra-evolutionary home and destiny of human beings, the true native guiding wind of home. A mega point. Well, that's just a concept, but Christ. A mega point is not a person, but it's Christ. He is the Alpha and the Omega, and it's a person. Don't get me wrong when I put a mega point there. And so, continuing on from the Old Testament, the Gospel speaks of the sons of this world and the sons of light. Luke. The former are the peoples, heathen. The latter are those who want to serve God and not the Lord of this world, who is the serpent, the guiding being of evolution, the grinding. For the sons of light, evolution is the path of the serpent, the way leading astray. And just in terms of number, if we consider one as one God, the development from 1, 2, and 4, 1 to 2, but no return to 1. Rather, it progresses from 2 to 4, meaning it's an illegitimate twofoldness. Because there's a legitimate twofoldness. Remember how we've talked about this so many times before? The monists, or the Indians, believe there is everything here is just an illusion. That means there is no legitimate two, if that makes sense. Just one ultimate substance and everything else is illusion. Of course, love presupposes two. A loved and a lover, and love itself. And so there's a legitimate one. But the problem is, instead of going back to 1, that should make sense, it continues on to 4. Recombinations, reweaving of multiplicity. There is an illusory element of reality. It's only true and real at the same time in the light of God, in the light of 1. Again, these are just numbers. They're just a way of thinking about it. Returning to Him. Not an illegitimate separate way, leading in the end to a crystallization and automatism, a self-referential, two-separateness. Experiment and grinding under its own steam. And so, what's the morality of the serpent? But also, what's the other side of nature? It's another side, virginal nature, as we've often talked about. And so it's written in the Gospels that the sons of this world are wiser after their own fashion than the sons of light. Here, a comparison is drawn between the wisdom of divine light and the serpent's cunning. Here, for this cunning taken as the sum total of experience offered by evolution and perfect earthly realism, it undoubtedly exists, and it's valid with respect to the surface. Facticity in the evolutionary realm. It's valid there only. There's other things that make this be, that allow it to be, and generated it all. If you could just look past the depths. To have them manifest to you as a fact of experience with grace. And so that the Gospels don't deny it, but acknowledge it is valid in its own domain. Be ye wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Matthew. This was the Master's counsel, the Lord's counsel to his disciples. Correspondingly, there is a divine decree from the Old Testament concerning the serpent. On thy belly shalt thou creep, and dust shalt thou eat all thy days. And that mode of facticity and surface, if we don't return to the Lord, is all we end up seeing. The surface facticity, no depth world. And believe me, there is another world of experience available to us that is as deeper, more diverse than what we see in existence. That we can develop that way. We've been developing all our lives when we're not moving towards Christ. On the horizontal, we're developing an absorbing experience, and we think we're the grand total of these experiences we've absorbed. But we are supposed to, and there's as much and far greater a degree of life in the vertical direction into the depths of the other world. Kingdom of heaven. I can tell you that is certainly true. And of course, the sages, monastics, priests, saints have told us this again and again and again. And so to this divine decree corresponds the serpent's cunning, that of earthly realism moving horizontally in time from one experience to the next, never raising itself up but creeping on its belly and nourishing itself on dust. Meaning crisis, truth crisis, to such a degree now that truth isn't even recognized. so chock full of dust and abstraction. Even the dust isn't even dust anymore. And so the increasing division and analytic splintering of the totality of the world of appearances into smaller and smaller pieces as atoms, electrons, particles, and then just its abstraction replaces any type of truth. So we're not in a crisis of meaning crisis, this additive we need back. Oh, I want to feel better. No, clearly not. The summer of love destroyed people's lives. If it was just about an additive, it's clearly the way truth and life is missing value, being. It's not some material world or physicalist world we need to make contact with again. No. It's not revealed and restored truly unless it's in the light of God, which the tradition, of course, shows us how to do. It's difficult. The narrow way is difficult to find. But it can be done. It actually doesn't take that much time. It's actually easy to practice, starting small. 3 oaths, how are they practiced? It's all practiced in concentration without effort in prayer. As I've got lectures on, and you can go to those lectures on my highlights page on YouTube, look up the practices of Christian mysticism, and on here in the live tab. Sometimes the lectures are, there's 2 lectures I think that are, just look for LL hashtag, and sometimes it's in the video feed because something went wrong with the live stream. So go there to find that. And so knowledge to earthbound intellectual realism signifies physicalism, dissecting everything to the end of ascertaining how it is joined together in the larger whole. How? This is nothing other than eating dust. This is also cutting up, it could be considered drawing lots of the mercenaries of Christ's clothes. Not Christ himself, but Christ's clothes. And so the essence of the serpent's cunning is most clearly and comprehensively revealed in empirical physicalist science, which is where the cunning of the serpent has blossomed into a worldview when it should never have been that, into abstraction and a ridiculous cosmology when we begin to see the essence of things and the facts of things. A distraction, a cunning distraction. Scientism and the collectivism that utilizes the results of this science, where science becomes flesh, represents the unfolding of the morality of the serpent, a morality that is rooted in the promise, ye shall be as gods. It aspires to the unbounded collective progress in conquest, utilization, and control of the world by means of a collective, organized rationality, technical and framing, as Heidegger calls it. And so we see in this, communism doesn't come from Christianity. No. It's the way of the serpent, clearly, because that's what the serpent does. It creates something that is as God, try be as God. It's not something that wouldn't have existed before. It's just merely a collective Wilsemacht. That's it. Same will to power in progress at its ground. No different. It's merely collective. It's merely of nature, a projection from Wilsemacht, species wide. It's not a mutation. It's simply something that happens in reality. It does definitely try to make itself look like at times, because that's what the serpent does. It's precisely the offer of the serpent. It's always been so. And Musk is participating in the same thing as a noble collective humanistic goal. But finally, there's another side of nature. Nature in the process of evolution, as discovered and investigated by modern science, does not represent the whole of nature. Admittedly, it's the greater part, yet it remains only a cross-section of the totality. Part of nature is not caught up in evolution. This part is usually overlooked because it does not fit in with the evolutionary view, and so It's of no interest to them. The evolution, as currently understood, does not encompass nature in its entirety. The fact that that's true is clear from this simple question. If it be true that the mineral kingdom evolved from the organic, the plant or vegetable kingdom, the vegetable kingdom into that of the animal, and then the animal into human kingdom, why does the mineral kingdom still remain alongside the vegetable kingdom alongside the animal kingdom alongside the human kingdom? One cannot, in all seriousness, speak of advanced and retarded stones or advanced and retarded plants. How is it that, though situated in the self-same terrestrial conditions, the greater part of nature has been unable to progress? It is of no avail here looking for some analogy with the human organism for help. Or in doing so, we do not find first a mineral-like skeleton system that then gradually develops through stages to evolve tendons, muscles, veins, arteries. Finally, to evolve the cerebral and nervous system, such as one would expect to be the case. In fact, there were an actual correspondence. If there were a correspondence with the evolutionary scheme. We're not denying the facts of evolution, by the way, the development. Merely the overarching encompassing of the whole thing as the only guide. On the contrary, from a single reproductive cell, there arises by way of cell division not only brain and nerve cells, but also those of tendons, muscles, veins, arteries, and bones. From the original cell, there is a differentiation into all the various kingdoms within the organism, a process corresponding far more to biblical principle of each according to its kind than to a progressive evolution. This is in ontogenesis, the individual genesis. That is the development of the mineral into the organic, and the organic in its turn into a nervous system able to be a vehicle for the psyche. If it's the case that ontogenesis, the individual in a womb, say, is an accelerated recapitulation of phylogenesis, the species as a whole, as we see its division with the cells, if it is an accelerated version of this, the conclusion to be drawn is that the macrocosm, by analogy with the microcosm represented by the human organism, is one, not the only outcome of an evolutionary, not only the outcome of an evolutionary process, but two, also primarily a product of a process of differentiation. That's drawing the analogy from ontogenesis in the womb of the individual out to the actual species. If it's an accelerated recapitulation. Thus, from a single substance, whether in the form of a primeval gas or not, is immaterial. Not only the mineral, but also the vegetable and animal kingdoms entered into manifestation simultaneously, corresponding to the biblical axiom, each according to its kind. Pre-existing archetypes in the sphere of creation, that means. That means that this aligns with the biblical narrative, actually. That's not to say there isn't development, though, and we'll see why. Manifestation is sent from out of the spirit, the vital unconscious, the psychological unconscious, which is more than just the individual. Our development is before. The archetype is before. Eden is where the archetypes are. It still exists. It's not manifested, though. Let's go on. And this process mirrors occlusion, which is, what is that? It's from a domain of potentiality anterior, before the development, and also after when it comes to temporal later on with Christ, of course. He's at the end of time. But think about an egg. It's a potential state into an actualization of a chicken. But we're talking here outside of manifestation itself. So nature has two sides. One, on the one hand, she's the field of action where the principles or archetypes or beings, you could call them, of the various species are manifested and guided by those final causes, you could call them, according to the biblical and Platonic maxim, each according to its kind. Two, on the other hand, she is a battlefield of evolution with its struggle for existence, its survival of the fittest, and its natural selection. The first nature, nature as a reflection and incarnation of the archetypes, is primary, whereas the other nature, that of evolution, is secondary. The solar system with its sun and orbiting planets, the atom with its nucleus and cloud of electrons, the living cell with its cellular nucleus surrounded by a moving plasma of molecules, these are not arenas for the struggle for existence, still less for evolution, which is valid only for part of nature as this manifests itself upon the Earth's surface. No, these three solar systems, these three systems, atom, solar system, cell, are structural forms representing the outward expression of an archetype of primal phenomenon, created but not manifested. Urphenomen, as Goethe called it, and if, or a proto-historical, before, outside of temporality but not eternal, but it created but outside temporality. And if the most all-encompassing among them, the solar system, as well as the smallest, atom and cell, quark, manifest one and the same structural archetype, why should there not be manifestations within these limits of still other structural archetypes? Was Goethe mistaken in describing this primal phenomenon of structural archetypes of plants, that is, the prototype underlying all the various species of plants, constituting the theme of which all plant species are only variations? And this is not the gene. A general non-specific view of the world shows us an edifice. A general non-specific view of the world shows us an edifice whose pillars are the archetypes. Again, these are not temporal things. These are not this thing in your head that we think are described. These are outside of manifestation in the spirit to a degree, but they are created. Evolution snakes its way through this edifice, adapting, readapting, and varying the archetypes in diverse ways in conformity with the end that it, and not the world, has in view. It's a cancer. Two worlds, virginal nature, necessitated nature. Evolution proper actually made a later appearance at a time when the process of differentiation had already formed the world into a cosmic organism that can supply the so-called natural evolution with a field of action. That doesn't necessarily mean what is talked about here is manifested, though, in the supplying. It's in a, say, if you're taking levels down from the eternal, the domain of form or creation before emanation, after emanation. Things that are experienced when, or spheres that are experienced, that's understood through the depth practices. And so this is understood by Goethe and people because they've done the depth work. It's not a generalizable thing that you can just access without moral purification, without initiation, without purification, illumination, union. You can't see this stuff. But a certain amount of people can, that we recognize as the great saints and tell us, and sages. But we don't listen to them. We just want the generalizable that any old person can repeat. But it's possible for everyone to do this, though. That's the truth. It's just not everyone that's there. The kingdom of heaven's at hand, remember? And so, evolution does not represent what is primary and primordial, but something secondary and superimposed, a certain type of development anyway. It begins its work in the organic realm, at first in a limited way in the plant kingdom, vegetable kingdom, in order to determine in ever-increasing measure the fate of the animal kingdom and humanity. In other words, within the biblical or Platonic creation, there arose, and that's only mentioned because each according to its kind, and he talks about kind also, there arose an evolutionary process signifying what might be called the growth of another world within a world of creation, a world for itself, for the sake of itself. Like a parasite, it took root and spread throughout the organism of world. It took root before anything was even manifested as solid. This is, in a sense, meta to manifestation. There is, therefore, a virgin nature as well as a fallen nature. One, the first that is of the divine archetypes, nature bearing paradise within her. Two, the second, or natura naturans is the first, and two, the second is nature, that has fallen into the process of a certain type of development, evolution, that reshapes and modifies these archetypes according to its own designs. That nature was at first archetypal or paradisical, and only subsequently fell into the realm of serpent-guided evolution is also evident from the fact that the predatory characteristics of many animals only appear or break through after a paradisical infancy. In the case of, it is a case here of ontogeny, individual, in a way, recapitulating phylogeny, species. So there's a kind of reversal there. It's recapitulating the species separation or development as separate as division, dividing, not mutating. It shows a paradisical and then a violent war against all. For instance, with lion cubs being merry and friendly creatures, no less tame and trusting than lambs, only to undergo a somewhat abrupt change later. And these are arguments for your inner faculty. It's for your inner reason to evaluate and see. But anyway. Only to undergo a somewhat abrupt change later in predatory lions. The same could be said of many other beasts of prey. However, this does not apply in the case of reptiles. Young snakes and crocodiles are as though already fully mature right from the beginning. One cannot avoid the impression that there are correlations, but up to you to see how convincing the argument is. And so one can't avoid the impression that such creatures originated on this side of the threshold of evolution, i.e. that the history of these species can't be divided into distinct pre-evolutionary and evolutionary periods. They are pure products of evolution. The serpent is their creator. Similar remarks could be made regarding many species of insects. So where do humans stand in all this? Wow. That is really for next week's lecture, but we will develop some of it in the next few slides. Okay. Fortune. A symbol of this whole thing that we've been discussing is the Wheel of Fortune, which is a very old symbol that has been in the emblemology of European peoples for a long time, and it's also in the tarot deck. But we're looking at the symbol, and perhaps reaching to the arcana behind it. But there are two categories of ideas concerning the genetic relationship and the general genesis of the four kingdoms. We've been discussing the mineral, the plant, the animal, and the human, which have their root in the intellectual life of humanity. We've been discussing that already. One is based on the idea of the fall, degeneration and descent from above, below. According to this class of ideas, it's not the monkey who is the ancestor of man, but rather, on the contrary, it is man who is the ancestor of the monkey being a degenerate and degraded descendant. If we recognize that man, being Adam, pre-exists eclosion, unmanifested. And the three kingdoms of nature below the human kingdom are, according to this set of ideas, the projected residue or exteriorization of the comprehensive being of primordial man, or Adam, who is the original prototype and synthesis of all the entities comprising the four kingdoms of nature. The other class of ideas comprises the idea of evolution, process transforming from below above, from matter, automatic process, basically. According to this category of ideas, it's the most primitive entity from the point of view of consciousness as well as biological structure, which is the origin of all beings in the four kingdoms of nature, which is their common ancestor. And so looking at this card, what do we see in it? This wheel of temporality and development. There's a monkey going downward, a dog going upward on the wheel, and a combination, a crowned, sworded, and winged sphinx at the top of it, which is a synthesis of the other two. Is it not? As we were just talking about, a synthesis. And the wheel goes round and round. So these two halves of the circle, the right half, speak to what's described by science. You could look at the bottom of the wheel as this same primal beginning, primordial beginning in manifestation, bottom of the wheel. The right side, the development, the desire and movement back to man, you could consider. And this descent is actually pre-manifested of the monkey. But it speaks to the problem of fall and reintegration. And we understand what really is going on here. Science only accounts for half the wheel, the second half. The descent and departure from the comprehensive prototype being. I know these are scientific-like words, but spirit, we're talking about real being. Leading to a complete fall before manifestation to a state of primitive animal, then manifesting, and a reascent towards this being, which you could say is guided by the omega point. Not as an automatic process, though, as we'll see. So there's the Sphinx, the idea of the fall in the sense of degeneration from a comprehensive being. This, as we mentioned, with the sword, the wings, it's got angelic features. It has wings, it's crowned. The crown stands for divine will. And these are lost, yet there's still a resemblance in the monkey to the being that is above it. And it's sort of half looking upwards still to where it came from, yet going downwards before manifestation, though. Proto-historical, proto-temporal. So it speaks to a unity of human, animal, and everything else, because the plant and animal are a synthesis of the things before it. Mineral and plant synthesis all together. That's why the Sphinx is all these different things as a symbol. The unity crowned. And so the monkey descending in the course of animalization, deprived of the crown, the sword, and the wings. This is the fall. This is the fall, but it's the descent is pre-manifestation, which is at the bottom. still bears features, like I said, bears witness to the origin. Again, this is happening, the dissolution to a primordial animal is happening before manifestation. These things pre-exist facticity as we know it. It's complicated, but hopefully it comes a little more clearer to sight. And ultimately, the Lord makes sense. The 7 days of creation are true when properly considered, and they actually do align with what we observe when we don't have a false cosmology. And so, and when we properly understand the depth of Genesis and what happened since then. And so it's from this prototype state of a being, a very real being, a comprehensive being, to the state of reduced and specialized being, a symbol of animalization, which is affected at the expense of the angelic and human elements of the prototype being. And the dog, a perfect symbol for the nostalgia of fallen and fragmented being, for the lost state of fullness. And remember, these are symbols expressing a wider idea, wider arcana, wider, multifaceted though, something that there's not only one explanation. They can, if they're authentic symbolism and they're connected to something higher, they are multifaceted. When, say, I express an interpretation here, I'm crystallizing it. And so we must be careful always with symbols, not to say that you shouldn't examine them yourself and see, once you have a basic idea of some sort of understanding, but in your attempt to look into it, you reach beyond it. And you shouldn't lock it down completely because, like I said, they are multifaceted, just like the word being is multifaceted. And so the dog, it's looking upward. It's most passionately drawn and attached to the human element as a symbol of the aspiration of animal towards union with human nature, the aspiration towards the Sphinx. This is the world we're very familiar with on the way back. A redemption, you could call it, but even a development towards man himself. And then further, because the Sphinx only actually gets you halfway, man. Portrays the whole circle, including ascent as well as descent, while the transformism of modern science is occupied only with half the circle, namely the half of ascent or evolution. The fact is that certain eminent scientists, such as Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I'll say it in their accent, I can't pronounce very well French, but Chardin, you would know him well if you know about the Omega Point. But Edgar Dack in Germany, they both postulate the pre-existence, be it only potentially, I don't know why only, but of a prototype for all beings, which is the ultimate as well as the effective cause, the final cause, the alpha and the omega. And so we're expressing scientific terminology here, but it's nothing other, of course, than the agent of growth, Christ. Being God, the other guiding, the other final cause that actually guides development. And even whilst the Wilhelm Act is in operation, this also guides as a spiritual election and selection at the same time. But also physically before man had become man from a primordial animal. But these things descended at the same time. Again, these are complicated things to make fit in with the evidence, but they do. Which we'll express over many lectures, although I'm not that this is necessarily, Genesis is necessarily the subject of what we do, but yeah, no, it is. It's part of what Christian Hermeticism is as well. And so this is what makes the development actually intelligible. Rather than a minimum to maximum, it's a maximum to minimum. And simply because when we look at these things that this random natural selection can be lead to, it's just not convincing to the thought. It's the theory of, it's not the fact of evolution. Yes, we don't deny the facts, observe facts of development. But in terms of the encompassing narrative, it's not the whole story. And so, but that actually doesn't change the fact that science works on the basis of the fundamental supposition that the minimum is the ancestor of the maximum. The simple is the ancestor of the complicated. And that is the primitive which produces the more developed organism and consciousness, although for thought this is unintelligible. This basic scientific presupposition renders evolution unintelligible because it disregards half the circle, namely all which precedes manifestation, be it only in order cognoscendi, in order of knowing, or potentiality, the state of primitivity, like we mentioned earlier, from which science then takes its point of departure, the bottom of the circle. This spiritual being and its descent, it's anterior to the incarnated. We don't deny the facts observed in evolution, merely the theory of it as min to max. The truth is, it is unintelligible to us because it denies the first half of the circle. Like we said, one has to renounce thought and reduce it to lethargy in order to be able to sincerely believe that man evolved from the primitive and unconscious particles of primordial mist, which was once our planet, without this mist bearing within itself the seed of all possibilities for future evolution, which is the process of eclosion, like we've talked about. The process of transition from a potential state to an actual state. There's something contemporaneous around manifestation that always has been there. It's not just this surface level. It can be found and interacted with. It, he. And the great sages have always done this. The great saints. And so this death, this involution, and this development simply, is it an automatic spiritual process if it's a spiritual process? All that is determinism and fatalism. Even all the Eastern religions, that is a determinism and fatalism. So is pantheism. It places the responsibility somewhere beyond moral human being. It's just this breathing out and breathing in, a dying and a living. It's in God, in the stars. Only, though, this is because all determinism is a manifestation of the psychology of the passenger. It's an exotericism from the surface world. It just, to us, when we don't do the work and development, it looks like it's just happening. That's what that means. That, we're just a passenger and it just happens. But those, the saints and all the great sages who go to the depths, even Europeans who are still Christian, but of a more great philosophers, recognize and discover this stuff in mysticism and look into the depths. They're the crew. Because they see, people like Steiner too, that there's something beneath the surface that actually moves and guides this stuff. Yet we ignore it. I used to too. I used to look, how absurd. Look at all these people, so many of them believing a lie. But then once you see it yourself, you then look back on all this huge century-long amount of work, even in these times. All these people, so many people saying what they're interacting with and seeing. It's a minority, but it's a lot of people and all those people have not degenerates and are not randoms. They are extremely morally developed and thoughtful, yet say this is, the depths reveal this. But you don't realize that when you first examining it is a young man. It's only when you start reading it and taking it seriously, you see how credible the people are that are talking about it, how thoughtful, how reasoned, how moral, how deep. And then you aspire to see it yourself, which is really all these lectures are about. Verify it for yourself through the practices we talk about. See for yourself. And so that process isn't an illusion, though, that evolutionary process for the passengers. It does happen. It's simply not revealed in its true light, but it can be. So you can prove there is a progression, of course, but it's only on the phenomenological level of the surface. But behind that, what sacrifice that every prayer makes, that every saint and sage through their every miracle actually guiding facticity, which can be found and noticed, participated in. My gosh, all these passengers don't realize, as I've talked about before, how much they are helped and healed by the prayer of others, by the saints that we don't know, even just by normal prayers of believing people. And even what errors and transgressions hide behind the phenomenological facade, and actually what spiritual depth world leads to, wars and various things that we experience. And it's actually things of the depths that are triggering it, plus the moral behavior of nations and men. Men not praying for their nations, let's say. And so with that understanding, we've arrived at the heart of the problem of exotericism and esotericism. And all exotericism means is saint versus mystic saint versus everyone's called to do it. That's all it means. It's the depth level of the church is all it means. Everyone who participates in the depth element. And so for that, the people that go to the depths, they recognize that it's personal, it's moral at the ground of reality. It's about drama, not just a voyage happening on its own. It's, I see. Because they have contact with truth. And so they see the agent of growth, you could call him. The authentic religious do. To see what's behind appearances guiding things. And they participate in the goals and divine will of that guide. Recognize that this return of the wheel is salvation and redemption. That the whole process isn't some automatic thing. It's a fall and a redemption. It's a downward and an upward. That's all it's always been, a return. Now to the final cause, who is Christ. He's now at the end of time, helping us through our direct, very real moral choices in this world to actually fulfill returning to him. But you can participate in that. And that's the true evolution or true development. It's the true development is nothing other than the prodigal son story. It's a returning home of man after this long fall, long development beyond the thing at the top of the spiral. It's spiral, not the wheel. It's to spiral out. Because as we'll describe as we go on here in the lecture, the spiral, the wheel is enclosed. It's an enclosed serpent. So next. The fall. And on that note, I'll just go to the bathroom quickly, friends. I'll be back in a moment. And so we've expressed some of this stuff already, but the close circle of Ouroboros is what occurs in the fall. He draws his tail towards his head and sweeps down the third of the 7 days of creation with him. 6 days, rather. Sweeps it down with his temptation. And therein manifestation. And so the Big Bang and this development is a fake cosmology, abstraction. Again, for the authentic facts that are expressed, that aren't illusory, for those authentic facts and happenings, that's not denied. It's simply the cosmology associated with it. Well, not associated with it. That, and you only have to look at quantum mechanics to see how ridiculous the understanding of the ground of reality is, and how the incredible amount of different interpretations there are, and how quickly and often they change. Like a serpent, you could say, to align with whoever subjective proclivities of the person are. But anyway, as we go on, actually, the picture from quantum mechanics does align more with the traditional narrative, especially when we see hyperorganisms operating. And so, as we all already talked about, the monkey is expressing the idea of fall, but it's before it hits the bottom, like we've already sort of talked about here. It's not exactly what occurs. Thus, from a single substance, whether in the form of a primeval gas, is not immaterial, or not, is immaterial here. Not only the mineral, but also the vegetable and animal kingdoms entered into manifestation simultaneously, corresponding to the biblical axiom, each according to its kind. And so you could say that this development is a way of thinking about it. It comes out of the spheres of vital and psychological, or soul unconscious, or vital unconscious, and the spirit. Or there's a sphere of emanation, sphere of creation, sphere of form, and then finally sphere of actuality. And this creation sphere is always there. And it's from this that where the archetypes are, right? And development is prepared there before this manifestation occurs. The fall and the 3 subsequent stages, Cain, the giants, these are proto-historical, proto-temporal warpings of the likeness of man. Warpings before there is even a manifestation that comes down. Again, we'll do a lecture on Genesis, but it just requires a lot of esoteric Christianity to understand what's going on. But we will do that. To the objective, it aligns perfectly well with Genesis, aligns perfectly well with true facts that are observed. And especially to depth facts that are not generalizable. Like we said, it can't follow the scientific process. There can't be a spiritual science. Even though that's been attempted by someone like Steiner, because it's always a minority who do. It's not doesn't have a repeatability, unless you actually do the practices and work. Then it of course does, but that's always a minority of people that do. Anyway, long story short, man pre-exists all this stuff. Like we said, he's contemporaneous with it until you can think about it, until his body is prepared, which exists already enlivened in the spirit, qualitatively. And this is difficult to understand, but we're just gonna put it out there for people to think about. Man pre-exists any development. And the development doesn't even happen, it happens from a primordial animal. But the rest of these kingdoms come down together. He's already alive in terms of will, because the proto-historical decisions regarding the giants, Cain, These, like I said, they're proto-temporal. They're decisions of will. And so they are bodies, but they're not manifested. Because you have a body because of a will to grasp it and advance at the expense of others. So the will is pre-manifestation. And these are very complicated things too. But they all are cohesive when you get a proper explication of the whole understanding of it. But it takes a long time to do, which great people like Steiner, Valentin Tomberg did, which a lot of this is a citation. Here's the citation for. Those things, those different kingdoms are disintegrated parts of that ultimate being. And they descend before he does. And so the actual other guide is this final cause that we've been talking about. But I think I've explained all the stuff, talked about the stuff. Created but not eternal, not in terms of the proto-historical archetypes. And so you could say that once that development ends, the soul that already pre-exists and has been developed unites with that prepared body. Thus the Sphinx. And then the true development, or the true redemption begins as the preparation for Christ. From then onward. And then we realize what the true arc is. It's the prodigal son story. It's not this grinding from material upwards. There's always been a guide. And this is a fall and then a guidance of return. But there's always been, but once we get into that manifestation, there's two principles operating because it's part of the fall. There's this evolutionary Wilsemacht trying to lead and create what he wants out of it. And then there's the guide of God, preparing through the people of Israel, but also man before he manifests like we've described. And so, going onward, the closed circle of Uberos. Evolution as understood exoterically is a cosmic process, biological or spiritual. That's not important. Whilst esoterically understood, it's a drama, like we said. It's about return, the mystery of return through purification in the sense of the ancient mysteries. It is the fall and the prodigal son story. It is the forming of a closed circle by the snake biting its own tail during the fall, locking out the seventh day of creation and sweeping down the third of the other days of creation. It's the creation of involution. It's death, toil. But really, what is the story? It's that, like I said, it's the reintegration and becoming man. And then Christ. It was in those 7 days of creation before the snake tried to cut it off. That seventh day is the spiral, is the Sabbath. And God's plans were all made there, as we'll see. That seventh day of creation to redeem us. So one, esoteric evolution, the open circle or the spiral, is the world before the fall of the 6 days of creation, crowned by the seventh day, the cosmic Sabbath, which corresponds to what one designates in mathematics as the step, the spiral. It suggests the idea of unlimited growth and advancement, being through its form only the introduction or the antechamber to eternity. It promises unlimited progress, but there is natural selection and spiritual selection and spiritual election. But we must remember that all saints are sinners. You don't create some group and say you're elect. No, it's grace, effort and grace. Only ever is. But had there been 10 righteous men in Babel, in Sodom, the city would be saved. Through the miracle. The miracle is the spiral, as we'll see. And so, in that, we know it's then moral. Had there been 10 righteous men, then the personal recognizes what we are doing and what our qualitative experience is, what we want as well, what our prayers are, what our hearts are. It's not an automatic development from some omega point. It's a development towards Christ through communication. But we must be the crew of the ship. Now, there was a degree when it's the development of man or a return to man. But once man's there, once Christ come especially, we have to actually make the decision to, because he's given us all the things to go back to him. He's given us everything. It's a moral process. It's the other side that's automatic. It's this push of necessity from the past and what has been to a fake projection of the future that is merely a recombination of the things that can be neither destroyed nor new. In terms of energy, you can't destroy energy. It's a constant. That's from physics. Neither created nor destroyed. And that's the true development, spiritual development. This AI that's coming, this development is actually, like I said, the spiritual, it's the push of the past into a fake future, not the true future, which is Christ, which is return to him. So 2, exoteric development, or is redemption. You could call it evolution if you want. It's redemption and salvation. The closed circle. Exoteric evolution. The closed circle, in contrast, is in principle, it's only a prison. Whatever its extent may be, it's still a closed circle, even though it seems to expand. So say we go out to space to Mars following Elon Musk, it's just going to be the expansion of the same dead being. Recombination. Ripped away from truth and value. It's a wheel that turns on itself and therefore suggests no advancement beyond the circle. Recombination. Expands, but nothing is created nor destroyed. And this is spoken of by Buddha, by Solomon, by Nietzsche. What has been done will be done again. All is vanity. The eternal recurrence of the same, as Nietzsche talks about. Belief in the eternal return has a basis not only in the calculation of possible atomic combinations, but also in the scientific dogma of the quantitative constancy of matter and energy in the world, like I just mentioned. Nothing disappears. Nothing appears in the world. The sum total of matter and energy is the world. In the world is constant. It is impossible for it to be either augmented or diminished. One can add nothing to it nor take anything from it. The world is a closed circle from which nothing escapes and into which nothing enters. Now, given that the world is a determined quantity, it is calculable. If an intellect knew all forces that set nature in motion and all positions to which nature was composed, then the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes. This is Laplace's demon. This is the world if we don't actually see the depths, that's what it is. It's simply determined. Fortunately, there is a cause outside all cause. There is a spiral that enters in, that takes things away and puts things in. Creation ex nihilo. The agent of growth, and he's always been here doing that. Might be a bit more there in that slide. I can't remember. I'm surprised that I remember that Laplace's demon. But what I want to quickly do is I just want to see if there's more to that slide. I believe there is. Yes. And so now, given that the world is a determined quantity, it's calculable, Therefore, the number of combinations of those particles is no longer unlimited. The limit must be reached sometime, and then past combinations will be repeated. The eternal return is everything is therefore, the eternal return of everything is therefore as inevitable a conclusion in a world understood as a closed circle, which is how the intellect sees things. The intellect is good at states and spaces, not actually a thing in flux and motion, as Henry Bergson well articulates. Whose and the world of closed circle, whose matter and energy are a constant quality. And so we go on. The open circle, thank God, it's true. You just have to do the moral work to see it. The automatic, accessible prompt from ChatGPT of the dead, crystallized knowing. Well, that's not going to get you anything because you don't have to do anything for it. There's no moral development that has to occur for you to see and experience the depth of knowing and the depth of reality and the essence of reality. You don't have to do anything. You just look it up in a book and it gives you some ready-made proposition, a surface proposition. So, of course, naturally, you're not going to see any of this stuff because you haven't done anything, because the world's moral. Once you do authentically, and it's difficult to find the narrow way, you do. And so naturally, the easy answer is what people prefer, and that's what AI gives them. You can even see an element of the dead recombination when I saw a young lady who said she put all her artwork in. I put all my original artwork into this AI to develop this and create this video. Basically framing it, saying, oh, look, I've created something unique here using AI with my art. And I looked at the end video and it just looked like some videos I'd seen by AI creating the same characters with the same determination of look. And I was just sad, is that if you just created it yourself, it would have been something unique. And it's just clear from seeing other people generate shots, you can see this element of recombination. Of that principle at work, this spider-like, endlessly complex recombination. Anyway, and so the spiral, the open circle, the miracle, the final cause, the agent of growth, the participatory miraculous, because the cosmic notion of a miracle entails inconstancy of the quantity of matter and energy in the world. A miracle takes place when the energy of the world undergoes either an increase or a diminution. This actually occurs in worship. He salves, he kills the low, first wine, sin, and corruption, and the polemical fighting energy, the derivative bios of the lower waters combined with the polemical, dissolves this and grants virginal second wine in terms of vital from natura naturans, free nature. This presupposes an opening in the circle of the world. For a miracle to be possible, the world must be an open circle. The world must be a spiral, i.e. it must have an uncreated sphere or a Sabbath as a part of it, as a cosmic fact. Now religion, all advanced religion, Christianity teaches that the world is an open circle. For this reason, it insists on the reality of miracles. Miracles, the supernatural, are a reality of action from beyond the circle of nature, which appears to be closed. This is the reality of the cosmic Sabbath, the seventh day. It still is. The good news of Christianity is that the world is not a closed circle, that it is not an eternal prison, that it has an exit and an entrance that he prepared, which is you, actually. This There is an entrance, which is why Christmas is a joyous festival. There is an exit, which is why Ascension is a festival. And that the world can be transformed such as it is into such as it was before the fall. This is the good news of the Festival of Festivals, the Festival of the Resurrection, or Easter. And the pagans were tortured peoples. That's why it was, as C.S. Lewis well articulates, is that this thing, this truth, that he had come, and the relief to actually interact with him as a cosmic fact was a healing of the spiritual burden of the destiny and this cloud of sin from even heredity around every pagan was relieved once they interacted with the Lord. This was what the good news really meant, the good spell, gospel. The good news wasn't some propaganda. That's your religion. That's how they see it. Oh, it's propaganda from overseas. Because you haven't experienced authentic mysticism, authentic relationship with a real divine, only divine being. You only experience culture and consider it as an extension of the political, really, authentically, that's true. Or it's Luciferic, like the East. It's unfortunate. That's okay, though. We give it time. The good news. The world is a closed circle, the world of the eternal return, the world where there's nothing new under the sun. What is this in reality? It is nothing other than cosmic hell. That world of paganism, that pagan world, was hell. The Greeks described it. Better to be alive than dead, because once you die, you don't go to the outside. You still remain in the domain of the collective unconscious, Hades. Hades and hell were liberated so you could be at the bosom of the true outside Father, and when you die. And so the idea of hell can only be understood as eternal existence in a closed circle. So there's two types of hell. We're in hell right now. The closed circle of egoism is a subjective and individual hell, and the closed circle of a world of constant energy would then be the objective and cosmic hell. And even after death, hell. Distance and separation, healed with love. And so now we have the cosmic meaning of the terms of salvation and perdition. So you can be in hell right now. Most people are in hell right now without even realizing it. Perdition is to be caught up in the eternal circulation of the world of the closed circle, the world without a Sabbath, without access to this seventh day. How many are? That's the tragedy when you actually begin to experience the mystic fact of Christ, the true cosmic truth as a fact of experience, of the depth of the true operation of the world. It's a tragedy that others could find him. Even some that think they've tried haven't authentically, because they couldn't give up their own Wilsamacht, their own. Hey, it's understandable, but you know this possibility is here for you if you can just let go of your superiority over him and bow and say, I know nothing, and he'll show you. You can know. Not through your own steam, though. It's effort and grace. Both. So salvation is the life under the open sky, where each day is a new and unique miracle in the infinite chain of miracles spiraling in for his makaron, or blessed, for his blessed. But God is not unknowable, but rather he's knowable through inexhaustible and infinite knowing, the infinite revelation ability and no ability of God. This is the essence of the seventh day, the seventh day of creation, the eternal Sabbath. The seventh day of creation is that of eternal life and the source of miracles, for it is laden with the possibility of the true new, the true outside. And from it, energies can be added to the constant quantity of the phenomenal world, just as energies of this world can disappear into it. Thank God, because things must be healed and dissolved by the Lord. He does this, salves and resurrects in the process of purification, illumination, union. What is purification but that? Outside time. So salvation versus perdition, individual healing or individual hell, redemption versus fall, world regeneration. That's what's really going on. That's what the circle is. The two other terms in the cosmic drama of evolution are the fall and redemption. It's now easy to understand them after having drawn out, to a certain extent, the cosmic meaning of the terms of salvation and perdition. And the streams are a continuous happening. Though one is this throwing down, being towards death, and a keeping thrown, a death and a toil, a pull and a push. That's the serpent. Involution. The other is not evolution. It's a father lifting up and fixing fall of a caring personal father. So it's not as the Easterners think, when it's just two streams, some automatic process. No, it's based on your relationship with him. Death, decay, mutation, grinding, experiment, constant stream. And yeah. And so the fall is a cosmic event too. That's what I'm articulating there. A whirlwind set in motion by the closed circle of the serpent biting his tail and sweeping down part of the created world. Sweeping down part of the created world, as Revelation shows. And redemption, to say it directly, is a cosmic act of the reintegration of the fallen world, first in creating an opening in this closed circle. The seventh day, which is the seventh day itself, which is religion, initiation, prophecy, which pre-exists everything, because the Lord, has a plan. It's anterior to manifestation. Then, in instituting a path of exit and entrance, which is us, that's man's body. It's not just an avatar, it's actually incarnation of man himself, but also what he does, which is part of religion and what Christ later shows us. And lastly, in transforming the fallen world from within by the radiation of the incarnated Word, Jesus Christ. Which we'll expand more in the next two lectures, but going on our last slide here, science and dualism's failure regarding nature. So alongside the struggle for existence, there is cooperation in order to live, and alongside mineral petrification, there is the succulent and breathing cover of the plant kingdom. The world can therefore be lauded and wept for at the same time. This is the origin of the problem of the fall. That the world is worthy of being sung for and wept for at the same time. The world is not what it should be. There is a contradiction between the totality and the details. For whilst the starry heavens represent a harmony, or express a harmony of equilibrium and perfect cooperation, animals and insects devour one another, and innumerable legions of infectious microbes bear sickness and death to men, animals, and plants. It is this contradiction which the term the fall alludes to. In the first place, it designates a state of affairs in the world which gives the impression that the world is composed of two independent, if not opposed, worlds. As if in the organism of the great world of the harmony of the spheres, there is interpolated another world with its own laws and evolution. As if a cancerous outgrowth has taken place in an otherwise healthy organism of the great world, like we've expressed earlier. Science takes the two worlds together and considers them inseparably united and names this totality nature, with two faces, nature benign and cruel, at one and the same time. Nature, both stubborn and astonishingly cooperative, wise and blind nature, nature, the loving mother and cruel stepmother, full of malice. With all due respect to science, it is necessary to draw, and again, that's just the theoretical, we're not talking about the evidence, we're talking about the theoretical expansion. It is necessary to draw attention to quite a simple error of thought that it commits. Notably, it commits the same error that a doctor would commit if he were to consider a state of sickness, cancer, as normal or natural, and if he were to declare that the cancerous process as well as the circulation of the blood were two aspects of the nature of the organism of the sick person. This would be something monstrous. If the doctor refused to distinguish between nature and counter nature, sickness, in the organism of the patient, yet this is precisely what science does with regard to the world organism. It refuses to distinguish between nature and counter nature, health and sickness, natural evolution, evolution contrary to nature. The ancients always knew that there is an anomaly in the state of the world, whether they attributed it to the principle of ignorance in India or the principle of darkness, Ahriman, as in ancient Persia, who is Satan, or again the principle of evil, Satan, as the ancient Semites did. It's not important. It's always a matter of distinction between the natural world and the unnatural world. It's not important in this analysis here. It is important, but it's not important for this particular point. They always distinguished between the natural and unnatural, the natural and the perverse, between health and sickness. It's always a matter of distinction. It goes without saying that Hermeticism, in accordance with Christian tradition, regards the nature of science not as the world created by God rather, but rather as the field where the created world meets the world of the serpent. The world of the serpent, this is the world within the world. It's not just illusion either. So it is significant, and there's a significant difference between that and the East there. It's the world within the world, which gave rise to the dualism of Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and certain Gnostic schools. These kinds of dualism fall under the title of heresy. They sin against the essential truths of salvation because they commit the same error as modern science, but in an inverse sense. Just as science refuses to distinguish in nature between the nature of orthogenesis and cooperation on the one hand, the genesis of the individual in the womb, let's say, as differentiation rather than a grinding of war of all against all from matter, and the nature producing genetic impasses and parasites on the other hand, so did the Manichaeans, Cathars, refuse to distinguish between virginal nature and fallen nature. The body was evil. It was all evil. But which is of course a huge mistake to say that the body is evil. It's a miracle. Because it's to say the body's evil says that the Lord has basically took no part in its development, really. But while science considers it nature, although nature is a contradiction in herself, as the sovereign queen of evolution who has managed to lead evolution from the albuminous cell to the developed brain of Homo sapiens, the radical dualists consider their nature as being evil through and through. In other words, science considers nature, in the last analysis, good. The Manichaeans regard nature as evil. Science refuses to see Satan there. The radical dualists wanted to see nothing but Satan there. The truth is somewhere in between, I suppose you could say, or rather somewhere in synthesis of a higher order. And the most general characteristic of the world of the serpent is enfoldment, crystallization, whilst the most general characteristic feature of the created world is unfoldment, blossoming, radiation. And that's the difference between what occurs for the majority of things that are paganism or whatnot is this enfoldment or even arbitrary magic or collective magic. It's a charging up of the will to power, or we've talked about this many times, or the battery, like a battery. It's only got as much as put into it. And that has effects on the world. And so you see these figures online, these various figures, they are charged up by their audiences and creating a kind of collective egregore organism. But it doesn't radiate. Love radiates. If your religion is grounded in a will to power, it's all based on a polemical combativeness. And that's where you get your energy from. When you lose the combat, you have nothing. It's got no ground. Whereas love, it's transformation by Christ. And there's so many great memes on that, is that people walking through a room, blessing everyone in their minds, it radiates love, radiates a virginal nature. He's not sucking it from other people or battling them. You know, he's not fueled by fight, because that fuel is corrupt and makes you just, you know what that does? Instead of becoming the true futural being that the true idea that God has for you and has for all time, you become a low, provoked being of whoever you're combating or whoever you mimetically inherited your desires from in the world. You're just a provoked push of what has been, not a free miracle from outside time, radiating a new virginal love and providential purpose into the world, rather than a push like the river of weird that is articulated by the former understanding of weird in the wanderer. The pagan wanderer is tortured, and that's what leads him. And what lies following that these days is an eventual mental illness, which might be able to be held off and viewed on YouTube. They can hide the symptoms of that. Eventually they get discovered, or leads to a certain type of instability of this Wildermacht. But there can be a hegemonic calmness, but it can be seen over time what truly motivates and the infection of that. It's not healthy. Whereas the whole hierarchy, from the angelic hierarchies down, whole hierarchy can radiate, not someone at the top of it sucking all the energy towards themselves, whereas everyone else has a bit of it. It's like a pyramid scheme. Paganism is a pyramid scheme of energy. That's a way of thinking about it. Anyway. All right, well, that's the end of our lecture today, friends. If anyone has any comments, feel free to send them through. Oh, the audio's in and out. Fuck. That's not good. Wonder why what that is. Seems to be working. The Oberos. There's been a few comments here. They're not exactly questions, so I won't exactly read them out. But for those who are in the fellowship, I'll see you over in the Discord, and we can have a chat about the subjects we've been talking about today. All right, everyone. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow for our 5-hour live stream. I look very much forward to it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. I'll see you tomorrow at around this time, going live at 12 p.m. Sydney, Australia time. God bless you.